Dillian Whyte versus Oscar Rivas. It's a very good fight. When this fight was first announced, there was a very positive response, certainly on my channel from my subscribers. They felt as though this is almost a 50-50 fight where either man could win and no result would really surprise anybody. That seems to be the general consensus and the general feeling, certainly when the fight was first announced. Some people are leaning slightly towards Dillian, other people are leaning slightly towards Rivas, but wouldn't be shocked if the other guy got it. Okay, that's the general consensus, what I was getting from my subscribers. However, since AJ lost in this big upset to Andy Ruiz, I've noticed a hell of a lot more people who have come out and now said that Dillian Whyte's going to get knocked out by Oscar Rivas. I think a lot of these people are being reactionary. I think because they were so shocked by the Andy Ruiz Joshua upset that it has turned their boxing world upside down. Now they're thinking up is down and down is up, left is right and right is left, etc. They don't know which direction they're going. Their head is in a spin. And so now they're being reactionary and, oh God, Dillian Whyte's going to get knocked out. Oh my God. I think this is what's going on because, again, a lot of people didn't give Andy Ruiz a hope in hell of beating Anthony Joshua. Whereas the people who did, the people who saw the danger that Andy Ruiz posed, were not so shocked by what happened. And are therefore not so quick to change their prediction and say, oh God, no, Dillian Whyte's going to get knocked out too now because the heavyweight division's just, it's all up in the air and I don't understand it. I'm trying to make sense of, oh God, Dillian. This is the way I think a lot of people are behaving and reacting. And look, Oscar Rivas, from the very beginning, had a good chance of beating Dillian Whyte. But Oscar Rivas has his own flaws. Don't get that confused for a second. There are strengths that he has that could lead him to victory, but there are also weaknesses that he has that could lead him to defeat. So let me talk about some of them. A good case study for Oscar Rivas would be to watch his fight here against Bryant Jennings, because you can see a lot of the things that Rivas does well, but also the things that he doesn't do well over the course of 12 rounds. Now, as far as the things that Rivas does well, which could give Dillian Whyte problems, Rivas has a very fast, solid jab. He's got a tight guard, which appears to be pretty difficult to penetrate. He is a sharp counterpuncher, Oscar Rivas, with good reflexes. He's an athletic guy. I don't think his foot speed is extremely fast, but it's decent enough when he wants to step on the gas. He can punch. And so far, I haven't seen any vulnerability in him by way of punch resistance, although to my knowledge, Rivas hasn't been in there with any big punches yet. Rivas, as has been pointed out by Dillian Whyte, even beat Andy Ruiz Jr., albeit in the amateurs. Rivas is unbeaten, so he's coming in there with 100% belief that he's going to win. And we've seen Dillian Whyte have issues with Derek Chisora, who's a pressure fighter, because Rivas is a pressure fighter. Dillian Whyte had issues with Derek Chisora in both fights. Many people believe he lost the first fight on points, and in the second fight, he was behind on points at the time of the knockout. So I can see why people are saying, well, you see, Rivas is younger, he's faster, he's more explosive than Derek Chisora. If Chisora can give Whyte all those problems, well, Rivas is going to go one better and beat him. I get it. But at the same time, there are certain things that Derek Chisora does better than Oscar Rivas, believe it or not. For one, Derek Chisora moves his head a lot more than Oscar Rivas. Rivas is a very stiff back. Hardly any upper body movement from him. He's not a guy who comes in bobbing and weaving. He's a guy who just walks right up to you, and he does cut the ring off pretty well, Oscar Rivas, that has to be said. But he will walk right up to you with his hands held high and really no head movement at all. Andy Ruiz, for example, who fights in a similar way to Rivas, has better head movement. isn't quite as stiff, it's a bit more fluid. Rivas, a lack of head movement, which is a problem when you're only about 5'10". Rivas is listed as being just over 6 feet. I think 6 feet and half an inch is what he's listed at. People, from what I've seen, there is no way that Oscar Rivas is just half an inch shorter than Derek Chisora, because Derek Chisora is listed at 6'1". If Derek Chisora is 6'1", there is no way that Oscar Rivas is just half an inch shorter. And if you want to see why I'm saying that, this is Dillian Whyte facing off with Derek Chisora for the rematch. There might be, what, an inch in it? An inch and a half, if that? Have a look at, and yeah, they could be, Dillian Whyte could be wearing thin-soled shoes and Derek Chisora could be wearing thick-soled shoes or whatever, but still, you can tell that, Dillian Whyte might be a shade taller, but there's not that much in it. But have a look at Dillian Whyte next to Rivas. Remember, Rivas is supposed to be half an inch shorter than Chisora. Look at Dillian Whyte next to Rivas. Come on, people. There is no way that Rivas is only half an inch shorter than Chisora. I'm saying Rivas is closer to 5'10" than 6 feet. That's what I'm saying. He's closer to 5'10". And herein lies another problem for Oscar Rivas. At 5'10", the same height as Mike Tyson, Oscar Rivas weighs between 230 to 240 pounds. I think he's even weighed as high as 250 for one of his fights earlier on in his career. Yeah, 251 back in 2015. For a guy who's 5'10", that's too heavy. And some guys naturally carry more muscle, a lot more muscle than other guys do, which is why you can have Mike Tyson, who's 5'10", weighing 215, 220, but middleweights who are 5'10", they only weigh 160. So everybody who's a particular height is they're not all supposed to weigh the same. There's going to be different bone densities. Some people are going to have wider bodies and, larger skulls and stuff like that, heavier bones, far more muscle, of course. But when you look at Oscar Rivas, you can tell from the way his muscles look, from his movement, that this is a guy who does a hell of a lot of weightlifting. And in my opinion, it's to his detriment at this point. He doesn't need to be weighing. I mean, he weighed 234 for Jennings. Before that, he was 240. This guy don't need to be weighing 240 pounds. Because unlike Andy Ruiz, for example, a guy who carries excess body fat is not good to, be carrying excess body fat. Don't get it twisted. But body fat doesn't make you stiff. Body fat doesn't cut down on your flexibility as much as excess muscle does. And excess muscle is very oxygen hungry. And if you look at the Bryant Jennings fight, Oscar Rivas comes out early and he's doing well. He's pressuring Bryant Jennings. He's sticking a jab on him. But midway through the fight, Oscar Rivas gasses very noticeably and allows Bryant Jennings back into the fight, and Jennings starts winning several rounds. And the momentum of the fight completely shifts. And this was not a fight that was fought at a frenetic pace. But yet Oscar Rivas noticeably gasses in the middle rounds. And I think it's partly because the guy's carrying too much muscle. Losing muscle is easy if, you're artificially pumping your body up. And I'm not talking about in terms of taking substances. I just mean in terms of using weights to increase your muscle mass far beyond what your natural muscle mass would be. That's what I mean by artificially. Just cut down some weight sessions, lose a bit of muscle, gain a bit of flexibility, which will allow you to move your head a bit more, help your stamina out. Yeah? I don't think Rivas should be any more than 225. You look at him, same kind of height as Mike Tyson. Maybe he's got broader shoulders than Tyson. So you make allowances for that and say, okay, Tyson was between 215, 220. Maybe Rivas can be between 215, 225. The high 220s at the highest for Oscar Rivas, in my opinion. So I think the excess muscle is an issue for him. And look, some people don't understand the concept of preemptive measures. They think, well, Rivas hasn't lost so far, so I don't see what the problem is. It's very short-sighted to think like that. If you're paying attention and if you know what you're looking at, you're supposed to be able to identify problems before they cause you to lose. Identify them and rectify them. So even if Oscar Rivas beats Dillian Whyte, those problems are still going to be there ongoing if you don't address them. Yeah, there's such a thing as excess muscle, where the muscle starts to become a detriment to you rather than a positive. So I think Oscar Rivas has got an issue there with the excess muscle, doesn't move his head much, and Derek Chisora gave Dillian Whyte plenty of problems in both fights, but Derek Chisora is a volume puncher. Derek Chisora is a guy who applies relentless pressure, never stops hitting you, never stops trying to hit you. Oscar Rivas ain't like that. Oscar Rivas, similar to Andy Ruiz, is a front foot counterpuncher. He's not a guy with a massive high work rate. He's a guy who stalks you, waits for you to make a mistake, puts pressure on you with a jab. I will say that. In fact, from what I saw in the Jennings fight, Oscar Rivas is a bit more active with his jab than Andy Ruiz is. But he's a guy who fights in bursts, really. He'll wait to land a good shot on you, usually a counter or when he's punching with you. Then he'll pile on some combinations. But in the general course of action, Rivas is not really doing that much. He's just stalking. He's not a guy who's extremely busy. So the way I think this Dillian Whyte-Oscar Rivas fight is going to go, I think the scenario I've got in my head, which I think is the most likely scenario, of course I could be wrong. This is a competitive fight, all right? This is not a fight which is one-sided in any way, okay? Although, what I do have to mention is the fact that the odds for this fight, the betting odds, are a bit wider in favor of Dillian Whyte than I expected. I did expect them to be a bit tighter and a bit closer, but they've got Dillian Whyte as a pretty firm favorite the last time I checked, which did surprise me. But the point I was making is this is a competitive fight. This is not a fight which, you know, many people would be shocked if either man won. But be that as it may, the most likely scenario in my mind is that Oscar Rivas has a strong start against Dillian Whyte, puts him under pressure. Dillian Whyte is forced to endure some tough, maybe rocky moments. But I feel like Dillian Whyte down the stretch, with his experience, with his height and reach, with his boxing brain, because he does have a good boxing brain, I think he will eventually gain control and box his way to a points decision. And remember that Dillian Whyte is a matchroom fighter fighting on a matchroom show in the UK, in the wake of Matchroom's cash cow, Anthony Joshua, losing all his belts. So if the referee and the judges are going to do anybody a favor in a close fight, who do you think they're going to do that favor for? Oscar Rivas or Dillian Whyte? I'm not suggesting that Dillian Whyte can't win the fight legitimately on points. But if this is as competitive as most of us expect it to be, then you have to imagine that Dillian Whyte is going to get those little favors, is going to get those benefits of the doubt when it comes to the officiating. And when two guys are evenly matched, that can make a big difference. So I'm also factoring that in, not just the styles, not just Dillian Whyte's experience, not just the strengths and weaknesses of both men, but also the political angle. Where Sky are desperate for Dillian Whyte to win this fight. Eddie Hearn is. Yeah? Needs to win this, Dillian. We're under pressure right now. That's how Eddie Hearn's feeling. So, yeah, I think Dillian Whyte is probably going to win this fight on points in a tough, rocky affair. Wouldn't be surprised to see Dillian Whyte maybe touch the canvas. I don't know what Oscar Rivas' chin is like. You know, we're dealing with a fighter in Oscar Rivas who really hasn't fought many credible contenders so far in his career. So we don't really know what he has by way of durability. All I can say from the Jennings fight is that his guard seems pretty tight. But in terms of his actual punch resistance, who knows? Perhaps he'll have an iron jaw. Maybe he'll take Dillian Whyte's best left hook and smile and laugh it off. Or maybe he'll get hit with that big left hook and he'll be wobbling all over the place. That's an unknown. None of us can possibly know that unless you're an insider in the Rivas camp or you've watched some of his amateur fights, you attended it. There's no way that somebody who's only seen the Rivas fights that I've seen, the few pro fights that are available to watch on YouTube, there's no way of knowing whether this guy can take a shot or not. You just don't know. So that is an open question. But the rest of his game, from what I have seen, he's definitely dangerous for Dillian Whyte, definitely presents problems, and definitely has a legit chance to win. But I just feel the most likely scenario is Dillian Whyte is going to take it on points, that he'll be savvy enough. And, I've seen some people criticize Dillian Whyte's stamina. I don't see where the criticism is legit. Dillian Whyte has been 12 rounds on multiple occasions. And in those fights, he didn't really gas most of them. I didn't see him gas in the Derek Chisora first fight. In fact, Dillian Whyte was the one who had more gas in his tank at the end of that fight. And that was a real tough fight that was fought at a very, very high pace. It was Derek Chisora who gassed more in the second half of that fight. Now, people point out Joseph Parker. He got hurt by Joseph Parker. And again, that was a fight that was fought at a frenetic pace, where Dillian Whyte threw a hell of a lot of punches. In the Derek Chisora rematch, you didn't see Dillian Whyte gas like that because he paced himself better. And again, I don't really think he gassed that bad in the Joseph Parker fight anyway. I think he was tired in the last round because he'd thrown a hell of a lot of punches, so he gassed to a certain extent, but it was also the fact that he got hurt. Getting hurt with a good shot, getting dropped, that's going to take a lot out of your gas tank. I'm more convinced by Dillian Whyte's stamina than I am by Rivas' stamina, from what I've seen. Because Rivas against Jennings, that wasn't a tough fight. That wasn't no barn burner where it was fought at a frenetic pace. No, it was fought at like a fairly mediocre pace. But Oscar Rivas still was noticeably gassing out in the mid part of that fight. Yes, he finally got his second win late in the fight. But to be struggling with stamina at a relatively pedestrian pace, that's not a good sign. And if you look at the way Dillian Whyte fought in the Derek Chisora rematch, that's how I'm expecting him to fight here against Oscar Rivas. I'm expecting Dillian Whyte to just try and put on a boxing display, not really get involved in much of a slugfest, particularly after what happened to Anthony Joshua against Ruiz. I'm thinking he's going to be just trying to put on a boxing clinic, tie the guy up. Maybe if he hurts him, he won't go for the finish. Remember that in the Derek Chisora rematch. He hurt Derek Chisora within the first minute of the fight and didn't go for the finish. In fact, Dillian Whyte didn't go for the finish against Derek Chisora at any point during that rematch. And he allowed Chisora to run into his left hook. He didn't go looking for it. I think we're going to see the same thing here with Dillian Whyte against Rivas. He's going to try to get Rivas to run into his punches. He's not going to go looking for anything. There will be tough moments, I'm sure, for Dillian Whyte. There will be tough moments. Might be a knockdown suffered. But I just feel like Dillian Whyte's experience, he's been in all these situations, man. Dillian Whyte's taken big punches. He's come off the canvas to win. He's been in slugfests. He's been in long fights many times. He's a battle-hardened individual, Dillian Whyte. He's been in so many different scenarios, and his boxing ability has improved and has come on. Now, I have seen some people raise concerns about Dillian Whyte's weight, and that is one thing I'll definitely agree with. I am concerned with Dillian Whyte's weight. He has been looking very heavy in recent videos, but then again, he's got quite a lot of time to lose that weight. Yeah, we're still 5 weeks away from the fight, and I'm sure he's in much better shape now than he was, a couple months back when he was looking real heavy. But at the same time, you do worry about Dillian Whyte maybe depleting himself, losing that weight. Yeah, because the layoff, by the way, between the Chisora rematch and this Rivas fight, that layoff could have done him a lot of good, I think, because I think he was tired in that Derek Chisora rematch. I think he was tired going in and didn't have that much energy going in because of how active his schedule had been. So I think that the layoff could have done him a lot of good, particularly if he kept his weight down. But, going up in weight, fluctuating, coming back down, maybe that'll catch up with him. We'll see. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the fight. I think Dillian Whyte is probably going to win a decision after coming through a rough, maybe rocky patch in the early mid rounds. Maybe a close decision. Again, I don't know whether Dillian Whyte can knock Rivas out because I've never seen Rivas hit with a big shot. So I don't know. That's an unknown for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening, I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.